Tonight, we are going to discuss the life and times of Al Bielek. Michael was able to interview him extensively over a 3-month period. He got to know him, his story, and decided to publish and release the DVD about Bielek. The website, again, is Bielek.com, Bielek.com. I would like to welcome to Fade to Black a very special guest, Michael Houtzager. Michael, good evening, sir.
Well, good evening. Good to be here.
You know, and thank you, Michael. And I know that you don't do this kind of thing often, if at all anymore. And we all, are with you on that. But just thank you for coming on, because Al's story is a special story. And we don't, there is no way to talk to Al anymore, obviously. And the resources out there for that and a direct connection are very few. And you are one of them. And just thank you for taking the time, Christmas week and everything else to come on the show. It's going to be great. Are you ready?
Well, I'm ready. I did my best to avoid the whole Al Bielek thing for many, many years. I had no idea it would get this popular and that many people would be interested in Al Bielek's story. And as you know, my whole life sort of progressed onward 15 years ago. To something totally different. But I agreed to come on the program and talk about my relationship with Al Bielek and the different things that he told me and that I asked him. So maybe there can be some benefit for all the hundreds, if not thousands, of people out there who have questions about Al. And I'll be happy to try to relate to you my experience with him. If that works for you.
Do you miss him?
I had a very intense and close relationship with Al for, maybe close to a year. And in some respects, I do miss him. The part that I don't miss was all the bizarre stories and the way that he made me expand my mind into thinking about things which I just thought were off the table. You don't even think about stuff. He opened my mind to many bizarre things that are happening out there, which I hope are untrue. But as far as being around an extremely intelligent man, that's something that I truly enjoy. And I miss that part of it. And I miss the excitement that he sort of brought into my life, because the people that were certainly around him were very intelligent and very fun to talk to, but many of the things they said were disturbing. So I miss the intellectual part, but the disturbing parts I don't miss.
Before we get to Al, let me talk about you for a second. Leading up to Al, and I want to know how you guys met and how that happened, because the audience is going to really love that part of the story, because it's very interesting. But let's back up before that. Were you interested in time travel or the esoteric edges of fringe science and ufology and ancient Egypt and all of that? Were you into that type of research?
You sort of gave a background on me as an individual already. So my main focus in life was not aliens or time travel or, history, really any of that. I was sort of a entrepreneur in a sense, and an engineer by trade.
And you still are. I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah. That's what I do, and that's what I love, and that's what I enjoy. However, what I truly enjoy most of all is the art of talk, because I believe through talk, that is the way that I certainly get my information, and I can appreciate those, such as yourself and others, who have that ability to carry on a very interesting conversation. So I wanted to try and see if I could be like an Art Bell. Now, I failed in that effort.
Stop. Let me jump in.
Yeah.
For everybody out there, if you really want some of the most fascinating interview stuff like ever in the history of man, Go check out Michael's interviews with Al, and no, Michael, you held your own. Okay, I'm just going to let you know right now. I've already told you I've listened to him so many times. I know them word for word, and don't be shocked. It's good stuff. It's great stuff. And so don't sell yourself short, young man. You did really well. Okay, so continue.
I tried.
Continue.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, I had a good mentor, I guess I could say. That would be Art Bell.
Okay, you just said Art 25 times. we get it. Okay, all right. Okay,
well, I'm sure he's your mentor as well.
As is everybody that is on radio, sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to try out this new medium, and I wanted to find somebody interesting that I thought I could interview, and I could put these interviews in an MP3 format, and I could put them on a CD and sell them. And I thought that was going to be a brand new market. Turned out it was around 1999. The whole world was afraid of Y2K. And I went to a conference in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was called a preparedness conference. And there were many speakers there, but Al Bielek was there. And he gave a 2-hour presentation. And I remember there must have been 150, 200 people in the audience. And he just captivated all of them for 2 hours. And I've never seen anybody who could do that.
Including yourself, right? Including yourself.
Including myself. No.
Right.
Yeah, people get tired of me after a while. But they don't get tired of Al Bielek. So it wasn't his subject matter that I was interested in. It was the fact that he was so interesting. So at the end of his speech, I walked up to him and I negotiated a deal. I said, I want to try this new thing out where I interview you, and then we capture it. We put it in this format called MP3. He had no clue what that was. But then we're going to sell your interviews over the internet. And he agreed to it. It took me, several months to get ready for it. But he and I went through a period of an intense 3 months where I probably met him 2 or 3 times a week. And he would come to my office and we'd sit down and he'd start talking and I would start listening. And I tried to put together a format of his story. Now, there may be people out there who don't even know who Al Bielek is. I mean, should we go through a little bit about him?
We'll get to that in a second, but this is important. I want to establish the ground of ever. And I want to ask you this really quick before I forget.
Sure.
When you saw him at the conference, what did he look like? What was he wearing? What was, how did he look at that point?
So he was wearing a suit and tie.
Oh, he was. Okay.
Yeah, he was wearing a suit and a tie. He's a very stoic type of individual.
Right.
With a commanding presence. And I put in there that, to me, he looked like a 3-star general.
Right.
And my dad said, why 3-star? I don't know why. I mean, that was just the image that came to mind. He's not a 5-star general, but he is, to me, like a general. And so he has that presence of authority. And when you look at him and listen to him, you listen to him. So now one of the people that I interviewed, if you notice on the CD, there's a guy named Larry James on there.
Yep.
He was also at the conference. And in fact, he was the one sitting at the table with Al selling books. And I didn't know who he was at the time. But he was there at the conference along with Al.
When the reason why I ask you about what did he look like, because theatrics is half of the sale.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Theatrics is half of the sale, and it's that presence that he has, and it comes across also on video too as well. I never got a chance to meet Al. I never got a chance to interview him. I wish I was a time traveler because that's one of the areas I would go to, but I never did. And I'm very appreciative that you were able to archive and get this down. And not only that, it's not short. You've got hours and hours.
24 hours.
Yes.
24 hours.
I mean, it's absolutely riveting stuff. But he was a commanding guy. You know, he wasn't what I didn't want to hear you say was he came off like a dingbat. He looked like he was insane and he was not in control of himself. But it was the exact opposite, wasn't it?
It was the complete exact opposite. I think commanding presence is the best way to put him. Now, when he wasn't talking, you know, he just seemed like kind of an older man, somewhat meek. But as soon as you put a microphone in his hand and he stood before you, you shut up and listened.
Right.
That was his presence. And what was so bizarre to me was that he had the presence of a 3-star general, but he didn't have a penny to his name. And I couldn't figure out, why does a man like this have nothing? It just simply made no sense to me, because I think in any industry, and I had been, you know, with IBM for 10 years, I had seen hundreds of executives, you know, people in management positions, and in my opinion, he was had a more of a presence to him than anybody I ever met at IBM, and that was a very successful company. So that and even to this day, I can't figure out why he was penniless. But it was fun to be around him. It was certainly interesting, and you were never bored. Never, ever.
When,
so I can say that.
When off camera, what did you guys talk about?
Oh, you want to get in that now?
Well, we're going to be up against a break because we're going to start talking about the interviews and his past and stuff after the break. But what was he like off camera?
Very matter of fact. I don't. He never joked ever that I can remember. Again, I want everybody to remember I did these interviews 15 years ago. So yes, I spent a lot of time with him, but I do forget things that happened 15 years ago. So according to my memory of him, I don't ever remember him laughing or joking or being funny about anything. There was no sense of humor to the man. Everything was matter of fact.
There are a few people that I have been around in this genre where when I talk to them, you know, away from other people, that's what I try to do. You know, I try to, you know, find out, you know, what's it, you know, do they like chocolate pudding? You know, just try to get them off subject a little bit, and they'll go there, laugh and joke, and maybe we can even talk sports or something. But then there's the other side where they are in the zone all the time, and that is them, and it's fascinating to me. It's this thing in with, you know, the human being. You know, some can have that ability to get out of the zone, and you can talk to them about other things. But others just don't do that. They don't. I'm not going to name names, but it's interesting that Al was always in the zone, and you never got him to laugh. He was always in the zone. That is fascinating, and I could understand that too, because the way that he does tell his story and speak, he is always thinking forward. You know, everything is always connected, and it's always moving forward. So I could see that's just his zone. That's his life.
It's interesting you bring that up. I really never thought about it until you brought it up. But it's almost as if there was this body called Al Bielek, but there was some other presence running him, because he was, and I met him 40, 50, 60 times. I don't know. But he was always a commanding presence every time I met with him.
I was thinking before the show about Al, and what we have is, and I think you and I actually referenced this a few days ago, but I think we have the possibility of 4 Als. We have Al, the time traveler. right? We have that.
Mm-hmm.
We have Al, a possible mind control experiment, Al, where he believes everything is real, but it wasn't. Then we have the Al that could be the best science fiction writer of all time, right? It's just all made up, and he's aware of that, and so there's that. And then we have the fourth Al that possibly could just be crazy, schizophrenic, and has invented this world for his own reasons, protection, his childhood, whatever. So we have those four possibilities there. And which one, when you look at those four possibilities, where are you leaning today, Michael, after 15 years to think about this?
Well, I am leaning toward there's a high percentage that many of the things he says are correct. There's a percentage. Now, I don't know. I wasn't there. It is my hope that he is wrong, because the things that he said are disturbing. But as time goes on, and I'll share with you later on, maybe after the break, as time goes on, so many of the things that he told me, which I found totally unbelievable, have kind of come true. So, and that disturbs me, because I personally hope he lies. I don't like what they did with the boys in New York City.
Right.
That's disturbing, very disturbing. I hope that's wrong. I don't like what happened in the Philadelphia experiment, where, people were, when the ship came back, half the people were in the ship, and the other people, in the hull and dead. Basically, they were melted into the ship.
Right.
I don't like the idea of mind control, where, is it true that we're actually, the way we're thinking is controlled by others? I don't like that idea. So I hope he's wrong. However, so many of the things he told me have come true. And I'll share that with you a little later. Now,
you chose to walk away, and you've got a variety of reasons to have done that. Can you share that with me?
Well, I never intended for Al Bielek, Philadelphia Experiment, aliens to be my life. I never did. This was an experiment in media for me. I just wanted to find an interesting guy. I wanted to use my skills and try to put together something that I believed in the future would pan out. I thought that, I didn't know they were called podcasts, and I didn't know that there'd be an iPod out there, but I could see it in the future. So what happened was this whole thing with Al Bielek and everything became so popular so quickly. And I started getting phone calls and emails from hundreds of people, it seemed like, who wanted me to time travel them back to the past so that they could correct something that happened.
Wow.
And then, and I can't do that. And then I did get a lot of people that said that they were involved with the Montauk project. And they were looking for a way that hopefully I could help them. And, okay, if you were involved, there's really nothing I can do. And everybody wanted to talk to Preston Nichols and all the rest of the people because they had their own things they had to deal with. But I was certainly not equipped to deal with this onslaught of people that came to me looking for help. So that was one of the reasons why I walked away from it. The other thing is, one thing Al told me was, everybody that tries to help him or do something like this, they all sort of fall on hard times. And I didn't believe him at the time. Like, what are you talking about? I'm doing well. I've got a business. I've got customers. I've got a good revenue stream. I will tell you, right after I published this CD, my customers dried up. My wife left me, and I did fall on hard times. So, now, does that mean it's true what he said? I don't know. Or was it just a coincidence? Now, I've recovered since then, but what you find is in the field of UFOs and time travels and all that, it's hard to make a living in that field. And at the end of the day, we all have to make a living. So I focused my energies and efforts into creating something brand new, even though I was sort of poor for a while, and turned it into a very successful company. But I did not continue in my efforts to figure out time travel and all the rest.
Were you ever threatened?
Not directly, no, but I was scared. I know that after many of the interviews that I did, I would drive home and I would think to myself, this is stuff that I shouldn't know.
Right.
And I would look in my rearview mirrors, to see if anybody was following me. It was too intense, too bizarre. I felt that I was in the middle of something that I shouldn't have been in. And I was thinking, whoa, what did I get into here when I was doing these interviews? Especially like I flew up Larry James. He was in Orlando. He would not do the interviews with me on the phone, so I had to fly him up. And he came into my office, and, the recordings are on the CD, but, I felt, when I heard what they were saying, I felt like I'm being discussed. These people are discussing secret stuff with me that I should not know. So, but I personally was never threatened. No.
With the two of them, and when you listen, their stories. Okay, I'm just going to say this in a direct kind of fashion. Everything seemed to always line up. It was such a complicated. It wasn't just one thing. Time travel. We did this. We went to that year. We came back. No, it involved everything: governments, military, Air Force, children, men, women, scientists, Nazi, Operation Paperclip, budgetary stuff, Congress, names, people, places, dates, and it is extremely complex that covered years. Were you ever able to catch a hiccup in any of it where something didn't line up? I haven't, and so I'm just wondering if you did.
Okay, we're going back 15 years. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I did find a few things that did not line up at all. I can't remember what they were. Especially with Larry. Well, okay, we had Stuart Swerdlow. He was on there. I think you've interviewed him.
Yes, I have. A couple times.
And so his story about Al Bielek was a little different than Al Bielek's story. Exactly what the differences were in 15 years, I can't remember. But I do remember that there was a difference. What Larry James said seemed to be a little different than what Al Bielek was saying. When I questioned them about these differences, I remember the response that Larry gave me was, the memories are like Swiss cheese. There's holes in it. And they struggle to remember exactly what happened. And sometimes in the process of remembering, they don't get it right. Interesting.
Let's take a quick break right there. It's a good spot to do it. Our guest tonight is Michael Houtzager, and for the audience, the very few out there that don't know Al's story or his background, so they know now what context we'll be discussing for the rest of the evening.
So again, 15 years ago. So if I get some of the facts wrong, please don't email me and say I got some of the facts wrong. But I'm going to go from 15 years ago in memory about Al Bielek's story. His main claim to fame is he said that he was part of the Philadelphia experiment. What was that? That was an experiment back in World War II where we took a Navy ship and we tried to make it invisible. Apparently the experiment went wrong, and back then Al Bielek was not Al Bielek. He was a different person in a different body. I believe his name was Ed Cameron. So he and his brother Duncan Cameron, when the experiment went wrong, jumped off the ship, and instead of landing in the water, they landed 40 years in the future. I believe it's 40. And now, what Al said to me privately, I don't know if I have this on the CD or not, but he also went way into the future, into a time when cities were floating. There weren't as many people on the planet, and he actually worked in maintenance, I believe. No, he was a tour guide. He was a tour guide in one of these cities, and he spent some time there, then went back to, what would it be, 1983, 84, and then back to the Philadelphia experiment. So it was all of this time travel stuff that he did created a rift. And as part of this rift, it allowed, I do believe he said it allowed aliens to enter into this space. So now that was one of the things that he was involved in, this time travel stuff. The other thing was in Montauk, he was part of a program that dealt with mind control, and then they also developed the chair, that Montauk chair, where someone can sit into it, a computer, an IBM 360 computer, and I know those well, actually captured vibrations, and this is where they killed the kids, to get the fear. They were able to convert that fear energy into, can't believe I remember all this, into a digital format, and then they ran that through the chair, and the chair produced a energy or a vibration which allowed them all to time travel. So that chair was part of the whole thing. I think what Al had to do was go out and get the kids, and it had to be a boy before they were 13 years old, something about puberty, and they killed them. And it sounded like they tortured them and killed them to get what they needed out of it. That's the part I don't like, and I hope is completely untrue. But a lot of weird things went on in Montauk. It was an underground base. Most people who are in Montauk that I've talked to that lived in Montauk have no clue of any underground bases there. So he was involved in mind control. He was involved in time travel, according to him. He actually said that he had met several aliens, they're reptilians, down there in the bases. In fact, one of the guys that ran the program was a reptilian, and he met him several times and said the guy was a very intelligent individual. So that nets out the whole thing without Bielek.
Were you ever able to look into his background independently and try to find out if he was Ed Cameron or who Al Bielek really, that type of background check and where he went to school and try to put together some of the pieces?
Back then, there was an internet, but it wasn't anything like today.
Right.
And so to do that type of research would involve a lot of funds, which I just simply didn't have. And so the answer is no. I did not actually go to his school records. I would have had to gone up to New York to have done that.
Did he have any paperwork? Did you ever see any paperwork about his past or military or DD-214 or anything?
I did not. No, I had pictures of him when he was young, and I took all the pictures that he had. He did a lot of presentations, and every one of the pictures that he used for his presentations, I took a digital photograph of those, and I put those all on the PC DVD. I just simply tried to interview him. I just tried to create a space for him to tell his story.
Right.
I wasn't really trying to prove or disprove it. I was simply trying to tell an interesting story and let him talk rather than me try to dissect it and prove it. I never came to the point where I wanted to prove it right or wrong. I just wanted to let it flow out.
There's one thing that's interesting with your part in this, in that, from your background and an engineering and scientific background that immediately says to me pragmatic, black and white, you just, but here you're stepping out of those boundaries. And did you at some point really find yourself down the rabbit hole and just wondering for your own sanity and were you confused?
That's a good question. I don't think I was ever confused. I'm pretty logical, and I was able to comprehend and understand what they were saying. However, the deeper I got into it, the more I learned I will never grasp this whole thing. It is too big. It is too complicated. And I do not have enough time to interview everybody involved and understand everything concerning the story. Because as soon as you peel back one layer, there's 10 more. And as soon as you peel back those 10 layers, there's 10 more. And so the question was, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Figure out these stories, or am I going to try to make a living for myself?
Right.
And that's why I left it.
There was one thing that well, it's not one thing. It's one thing that happened over and over and over again when you were interviewing him. And it's one of the most fascinating parts of Al that it's just for me to wrap my mind around is his ability to, when you would stop and ask him a question in the middle of the interview, and he would have to maybe take a right or left hand turn off of the subject matter. But whatever that was, he had the ability to, even if it let's say it's true, it's a true story, everything is true. Well, to have that type of memory recall, on real events is difficult enough. And if you are making it up on the fly, it is 10 times more difficult. But you just said it right there. It was always every layer brought in 10 more. And those 10 layers, each one fanned out 10 times. And that's right. Exactly, it happens constantly throughout the interview, where he would be able to go, you would say something like, well, I'm paraphrasing here, Michael, but, well, what about funding? Well, see, that was another concern because when we went to, and he would just go off, and it's just like the craziest thing. And so to be able to piece all of that together it's astounding. And I just don't know how a mind can do that. I can't.
You can. You're good. Here's what I noticed about Al is now he had a lot of canned answers, and when we first started the interview, he gave me the spiel. Now I'm a salesperson. I was a salesperson at IBM. I started as an assistant engineer, but I went into sales, so I know a sales pitch when I hear a sales pitch. So I heard this sort of canned stuff. I heard canned answers. So in my mind, there were, in his mind, repositories of answers, which he was picking and pulling from. The thing I wanted to do was I didn't want him to go to those canned answers. I wanted him to go to his memory of what really happened. So if I sensed that he was giving me a canned answer, I would stop him, I'd interrupt him, and I'd try to change it a little bit. So he would give me the real answer. And I did that many times.
When he would do that, would he pause? Was there the way that it's presented in the DVDs, and I listen to it on audio all the time too, without watching it. I'll just listen. Were there any dramatic pauses, or was he literally on tempo?
You're taking me back 15 years. I don't recall dramatic pauses. I recall a minor pause, but nothing where I could say, aha, I got you. I caught you in a lie.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I can never say that I caught him in a lie, intentional lie. I think I made him think, and no one has ever interviewed him the way I interviewed him, because he's always standing in front of an audience of a few hundred people.
That's
and
right.
He's giving the story, and then he's taking questions and giving answers. But this was kind of a new format for him. where, there's somebody sitting down with him for 10, 20 hours and going through the story piece by piece. So I can tell you in my memory, I don't think I ever caught him in a bad lie. He just made a few comments that really shocked me. So maybe the pauses came from me, but not from him.
Now, the first time, take me to the first time you guys sit down. This is our minute number one, right? That you sit
right.
down. Are you prepared? Did you have notes?
No.
Good. That's a good answer, Michael.
I had no notes.
That's a good answer. But what about Al? What about Al? I've never seen him glance down. I've never seen him reference anything. Did he have notes or anything like that with him?
So Al had no notes. I had no notes. I had listened to his presentation, so I had kind of an idea of what he was going to talk about. But I wanted this thing to flow. I took notes as he was talking, but I wanted it to flow as the conversation flowed, and I didn't really want to make anything up. So as he talked, I was sort of architecting the story, and I would write things down, and then I would try to figure out on the next interviews, where do we take it from there, based upon what he told me. Maybe I wanted to, talk more about his jump off the USS Eldridge. Okay, that might have been the subject. But I do recall, after a certain period of time and listening to him, I recall me telling him at the end of one of the interviews that, Al, nobody's going to believe any of this stuff. And I need some other people that I can interview that will somehow give a similar story or support your story. And that's when he gave me the names of all these other people that I interviewed, like Stuart and Larry and Preston Nichols and all the rest. They were all difficult people to interview. They were very wishy-washy. They had their little canned responses as well. But I did my very best to try to pull something out of them.
Did Al ever ask you for money? Was he ever motivated by money?
So not really. The deal was that we would create this program. I would sell it, and he would get a certain percentage of what I sold. And I did pay him. I paid him for quite a while for whatever I forget what the amounts was. It wasn't a ton of money.
But he wasn't. But he wasn't driven. He wasn't driven by money.
No, he was not. I was more concerned about money than he was for him. There were so many times he would come up to my office, and I had an office with 40, 50 people in it. He would drive, his car would break down. I might have to buy him something to fix his car, or, I would always feed him whenever he came. He never seemed to have any money, which, again, that always shocked me. And there was one time the History Channel came and they called me up, and I negotiated some sort of a payment for him to do a videotaping of his story. They did it. They brought in a camera crew from Atlanta, and they taped him. Whatever happened to the program, I don't know. But I do recall that the people they hired to actually shoot the video said to me that that was the most interesting video they have ever seen. Or that the interesting project they've ever worked on. There were like 4 of them, and they were all completely shocked.
Yeah, I don't think that they were lying.
No,
not at all.
No.
Now
they do this every day.
Exactly. Now, I have been around stuff like this a lot, and sometimes I see people rehearsing what they're going to say when the camera's not rolling. Talking to themselves, or working on that canned answer. Did he ever do that, or was he just went for it?
Wow, he never rehearsed anything.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And see, never.
Yeah, he just went for it, and he didn't really care what you thought about his answer.
Obviously. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I can see that. There
He
was
could care less.
Yeah.
He would just say stuff.
Now, I remember, and again, I need you to refresh my memory if I'm incorrect here, but didn't he say at one point that he didn't remember the Philadelphia experiment until he saw the movie? And then everything kind of came crushing back. It was hidden memories.
Right. Well, that's correct. That is correct. So that's what triggered the memories. So do you understand that Al Bielek is not the body of the person that went through the Philadelphia experiment?
That's right.
And he wasn't really forthcoming on that. I had to sort of piece that together because I thought it was him as with a different name, Ed Cameron.
That's right.
But no, it was through that Montauk chair that I told you about that they were able to take his soul and put it into another person.
Yeah. Why don't we let's back up and explain to everybody what happened. I'll help you out first. I'll do the quick setup. The Eldridge, the Philadelphia experiment, that we were trying to, in World War II, hide our Navy from German radar and German submarines so we can get across the Atlantic back and forth, and that was the intention. It wasn't to make our ships invisible, but invisible to radar, much like stealth technology today. One of the ideas was that they could degauss the ship, massive amounts of electricity, and take away the magnetism and the visibility of metal to radar. That was the idea. They threw high voltage equipment onto a few ships, but specifically the Eldridge, flipped the switch and tried to demagnetize the ship to make it invisible to radar. And when that happened, all hell broke loose. And a fog had enveloped the ship. There's many different stories to this, but and then the ship was gone. And it appeared in another port, and it's like 15 minutes, right? And then the ship was brought back, and when the smoke cleared, sailors were caught in the middle of the metal. They were stuck in walls. Some died. There was that, and then but two brothers, Ed and Duncan Cameron, managed to jump off the ship before the ship disappeared. I think is how it went down. Anyway,
right. That's correct. Yeah.
They jump overboard, but jump into a vortex, a time hole of some kind, and disappear. Right. And those guys went to the 1980s. I think it doesn't matter.
It was 1984. They landed at Montauk.
They land at Montauk. And now, so that's the story, and so that's the lead up to it. So for the Ed and Duncan Cameron brother team, Al Bielek was actually Ed Cameron.
Ed Cameron. Yeah, he was Ed Cameron, and actually from 1984, I forget what the date was, but they both went way into the future for a few years and came back. But the reason why it's Al Bielek now was because I'm trying to remember exactly how it worked. I know there was an aging problem that Ed Cameron was getting old quick. And this could have been another version of Ed Cameron. That's the problem with time travel, is you don't know what version of the person you're talking to, and sometimes they overlap. But there was an aging problem, and so they had to sort of put him in the chair, take his soul out, and put his soul into young Al Bielek. And Al Bielek's first memory is, as a child, he remembers, I think, his mother playing the piano. And he was fairly well developed at a very young age. He has pretty vivid memories of understanding what happened then. So that's how it all happened. Hard to believe, but that's the story.
Wasn't he? Did he ever show any apprehension to somebody unraveling this? He never. It never came across that way to me. He just didn't care. So
he didn't care.
Yeah,
No.
like he had nothing to hide.
To lose.
Right.
Well, he had nothing to hide and nothing to lose as well. You know, what are you going to take away from a guy who has nothing? And it didn't seem to me that his motivation was to make any money. So even though I was the one that tried to help him make more money, I did everything I could to help him. But he just never really seemed interested. Bizarre, really bizarre. So I felt that he, in his own mind, was telling the truth. Now, whether that was the truth or not is a different story. But I believe that he said the truth as he understood it to be.
We're going to be up against a break here in 3 minutes. When you were doing these interviews, the internet was all abuzz back then about John Teeter, the time traveler. Did Al ever mention anything to John Teeter to you, on or off camera?
You remember that? Wow. Al never said a word about John Teeter, and I think that was a Art Bell thing.
Yes, it was.
Probably was not real. But, there's other people that claim that they were part of time travel programs. And, just because Al doesn't know them doesn't mean it didn't happen. So the only people that we knew about was Al, Duncan, Preston. He said Preston was quite involved in it. And then this guy, Larry James. Those are the only ones that I knew about.
We're going to be up against a break, and we'll take that in just a second. Out of everything that he had described, the one area that he was pretty not only descriptive but pretty strong about was his time in the future in the hospital room. What he saw, he saw the new map of the United States. He described the city. He gave a pretty fantastic and what seems to me an accurate view of the future. I'm referring to flat screen TVs and whatnot. I thought that was pretty amazing. And what did you think about that part of his story?
Well, he was telling the story from 1984, so he could have, and the time I did the interview, I think was 2000, something like that.
Right.
So yeah, he didn't talk about, to my memory, a flat screen TV. I remember him talking about color television and seeing commercials, if I recall, about 747.
I was referring to when he went to 2300 when he went way into the future. He woke up in a hospital room, and he described the hospital room and the flat screen TVs and how the programming was.
You did listen to my interview.
I listened to him. Michael, you have no idea. All right, let's take a break. We'll be back more with Michael Houtzager right after this. The Life and Times of Al Bielek, Time Traveler. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. But tonight, our guest is Michael Houtzager. Michael, when it came to Montauk with Al, he was created there, number one. But number two, he became a worker. He was part of the program. And it seemed to me that he didn't have any, he felt bad, but he didn't have any regrets. And his answer was always, it was my job. It was my gig. It was all of our jobs. It was and we just did as we were told. And he said it in a matter of fact, kind of a chilling sort of way. Did it hit you the same?
It hit me the same. And that's when I began to question everything. What they did, if it's true, again, let's not say we know for a fact it's true, but the idea of going out to New York City to abduct young boys and bring them into a program where many of them died is simply not a comforting sort of an idea for me. I've got two young boys of my own. He never seemed to regret it, though, that he did it. It was all matter of fact. This is what we did. This is how we did it. I was part of that program. He never seemed to have any regret.
In interviewing Stewart and also Chris Garetano, the director of the Montauk Project, or the Montauk Chronicles, that movie that was just released earlier this year, and others, they, when the question is always, well, where did you find, how did you get, oh, well, the easiest thing to do is to go out and find some runaway kid,
Right.
that nobody's going to miss, that is out there on the streets, and you go and you pick them up. And the other aspect to that is once you do that, then you start the mind control aspect of it. And they are nothing more than, rabbits in a laboratory at that point. And you start the mind control on them. And I have interviewed many. And when you hear it in that, in that format, then you kind of understand the feasibility of everything, where it does make sense. And how many victims? It doesn't matter. Nobody knows. Runaway kids are runaway kids, and they're not tracked and they're not followed. And a lot of their families aren't followed, especially back then. Today it may be a little bit different, but that's how this thing kept moving along.
Yeah, there didn't seem to be a problem with finding people when they were doing the program.
With
he never said.
Do you think when you have Stewart's description of this, and this is where for me it gets a little bit dark, but when you have a handler and you are being manipulated in some type of MK Ultra mind control program, which we know did and probably still does exist, and I want to talk about that in just a second. These programs are real, and that manipulation is there. And eventually you're going to lose control and lose sight of who you are really as a person too. Is that a possibility for Al too as well, that he just may have been a victim of a mind control program from the word go?
Well, anything's a possibility, right? I feel anything could have happened with Al Bielek. I just don't know. I was going to say something about mind control. I remember he did a test on me because he feels a lot of people are mind controlled. And after the test, he said I was not mind controlled.
Oh, wait. Stop right there.
Yeah.
Okay. What did he do?
So he had these pictures, and you're supposed to stare at the pictures and let objects come out and identify what the objects are. Have you ever seen those where it's a random number of different objects in the picture, and then if you sort of lose your focus, then you can see the object come out.
Okay.
And I'm sure you've seen these.
Yes.
But I was able to do it quite easily and pick out all the things, and he said, you're not mind controlled. And he says he's given this test to many other people, and they are mind controlled. He feels that I didn't go through any of this because I grew up in Germany when I was a young kid on army bases, and he feels that's the reason why I was left alone.
So did I. So maybe that's why I've been left alone. See, audience, everybody out there that thinks I'm some MK Ultra super soldier, disinfo CIA agent, I'm in the clear.
Me too. As far as I know.
Woo. Man, I can feel. Yeah. I feel better already. Now,
what was it? Just your question. I'm sorry, I may have missed it.
Well, it's just with. I mean, could it be? See, this is the thing with Al. It's to the only way to recall names, members of Congress, cabinets, generals, sergeants, scientists, times, dates, places, ranks, occupations, all the way down the line. It would be years and years and years and years of intense study into all kinds of different areas. And where does one do that? And how do you pull that off? And where does this recall come from? So either it really happened to him, and these are life events for him, or they could have been implanted too as well. And he doesn't, he would perceive that. Both cases are equally as scary. There's no doubt about that. But his references to these mind control programs, did he ever make a comment to you on or off camera that he could possibly just be a victim of MK Ultra or some crazy CIA experiment?
Well, you're naming MK Ultra CIA. I can. You're bringing back a memory now. I remember many times we do interviews and he was tired. He would come in tired, and what he said was that while he's sleeping, they will basically do something that takes him or his soul or his person into another time zone, completes a task, and then he goes back. So imagine on a clock, 10 seconds has passed. But for him, it could have been 10 days. So in 10 seconds, he did 10 days worth of work. And he would every now and then say this happened to him. So I don't know what program that would be, but he did tell me that's the reason why he was tired.
And this was happening during your interview sessions?
Yes. Yeah. I just remembered it now.
Did he ever, okay, let me help you. This is my MK Ultra right here. That's what I'm doing. Did he ever mention what any of the missions were?
He may have. I apologize. I just don't remember it. I remember, I think when people tell you stuff like that, you discount it as false immediately. So I probably didn't pay close enough attention to it.
So what you're saying, I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this a little bit here. You're getting together. You're going to sit down for an interview session. He looks a little disheveled, a little tired, and you say to Al, "Hey Al, you look a little tired today." "Well, yeah, I had to go out and save President Lincoln last night. They used me for another trip." Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Really?
I don't recall what he did, but I recall him saying every now and then they will go in, get him for, say, 10 days. So he had, but it was only 10 seconds had passed. But when he come back, he was completely exhausted. So I remember that happened a couple of times.
You've just blown my mind. And what do you do? I mean, see,
I didn't believe it.
Yeah, what do you do?
I didn't believe it.
I mean, it's Al Bielek.
How do you answer that? Yeah.
Right, it's Al Bielek. So you've got to think that there might be something to it. That's the crazy part. And for you, that's why I was asking earlier, Michael, and I'm not making light of this. I want you to go with me a little bit. At some point, you have to say to yourself when you're driving in your car, looking in your rear view mirror for the Men in Black, right? And you're doing that, you're either the world that you know it isn't real, right? That's it. Everything is a lie. Everything that you know, everything that you trust and honor just quite simply isn't real, and the world that we know it and the government that we know and everything that we know is completely false. There's no gray area here. And how did you feel? I know that you had those thoughts. You had to.
Well, you described what I was feeling better than I could have described it. And so how do you deal with that? You put them to the test. You have to come up with a test that will either prove or disprove him. And I came up with a test. Share that with you.
Yeah, talk to me.
Okay. All right. So while I was doing the interviews, there was a presidential election going on. It was between George Bush and the other guy.
Clinton.
You remember that?
Well, yeah, Clinton?
No, not Clinton. Al Gore.
Oh, Al Gore, right.
Yeah, so it was way back then. So this is 1999, 2000, something. No, 2000.
Right.
So it's Bush versus Gore. very close election. So, and I was interviewing it. This is on the CD somewhere.
Yeah, this was the Hanging Chad's election, right?
Hanging Chad's elections.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
You know, it was determined in Florida, and we'll go through the story, but so I'm thinking, this has got to be a bunch of BS that Al's saying. We can prove it. So I sat down there. The microphone was on. This was before the elections, and I looked at him and I said, Al, who's our next president? You've time traveled. You've been in the future. Who's our next president? Without thinking about it, without hesitating, without anything, he looked at me, and I said, who's going to win the presidential election? That's what I said. And he looked at me and he said, no one.
Say what?
And that's what he said. He said, no one's going to win. And he says, but they're going to give it to George Bush.
Shut up. Says, Michael, slow down.
It's on the CD, I swear to God. He said they're going to give it to George Bush, and he went through a long spiel about how it was going. I think he said not the Supreme Court, because it was the Supreme Court that did it, but he said Congress was going to do it, and that he will be your next president. And that is what he said. And I'd say he got about 98% of it right.
Yeah,
and what's the chances at that time, at that point in time, this was maybe a month or two before the election, that he would get it right like that? I mean, he knew for sure it was going to be George Bush. He knew for sure nobody was going to win. He knew for sure it was going to go into government somehow, and they would decide. And he said they're going to give it to George Bush. Now, I thought at that time that this entire project was a complete waste of my time, because there is no way that that's going to happen. But I felt to be a pseudo journalist, and I think, you got to tell your own truth. So what I did was, in the office that I was in, there was maybe 40 people there, and they were all wondering what the heck I'm doing with this Al Bielek guy. I went out and told every one of them what Al Bielek told me. And they all laughed at me. They all said, this is not going to happen. Well, I will tell you, after that election, there was panic throughout that office, because they knew I was talking to someone who said he was a time traveler, had visited aliens, and they all thought I was crazy. But I had also shared with them what he said about how the presidential election was going to go down. And they literally panicked, because they didn't know how to deal with that. Because he just said something which nobody would have believed to be a truth at the time, and he nailed it. And then, therefore, that means there's a reasonable chance that the rest of the stuff he's saying is true.
Wow. Where were your offices? Were you in Florida, too?
No, I'm not. I did all this near Atlanta. It's in
you were in Atlanta. No, this is before he moved to Florida?
Right.
Okay. Because that would just throw another whole spin into the whole story too, as well. Now, when wow. So now, when the election happens and Florida happens, did you have a holy crap sort of moment?
Yeah, it was beyond a holy crap. It was me and all my friends, everybody. We were totally convinced that this was going to be the thing that we could use to say Al Bielek is a liar. Because trust me, I honestly don't want any of this stuff to be true. Despite what people say about me, it's disturbing. So I felt I had him, but he had us on this, and then we had to really rethink and take a second look at everything that's on here.
I'm going to open up the phone lines, too, by the way, everybody. I'm just going to let you know now, 323-825-5045, 323-825-5045. You can also Skype in Fade to Black 14. I've hit the switches. They're on. I want to sort of change gears, but not. You also put together some stuff on Phil Schneider, and he is somebody that has fascinated me from the word go. And it's not his story is his story, but it was his death to me that freaks me out the most about Phil Schneider, because I feel like he was murdered. And the way that he died or was murdered, then you have to go back and look at his body of evidence and his presentation and his speeches. And you've certainly reviewed all of it just like I have. And what's the relationship with Al Bielek? Well, it's actually very similar in that we have two stories here that are hard to swallow. And Phil Schneider, and certainly towards the end of his day, he went from underground bases to international politics and black projects, and he went way out there, and then he was just offed. And I think it was totally tragic. What do you think about Phil Schneider's story, once you tie in the way that, his time ended on Earth?
Well, we're covering a lot of ground tonight, aren't we? So people are going to have to do some research on Phil Schneider. Probably not everybody knows who he was. I do know. I talked to Al quite a bit about Phil Schneider. The two of them used to go to conferences together and were roommates.
That's right.
I remember that.
Yep.
And they would both give presentations, but they always shared a room and became very close friends until he died. So apparently the way he died, if memory serves me, it was a piano wire around his neck, and it's sort of like suicide with two bullets in your head. I mean, the way it happened, you couldn't do it yourself.
Yeah, I think it was actually I think it was surgical tubing, which even makes
something.
Makes it even crazier.
So he was killed without a question. But we'll never know who did it or why or what happened. But he had quite a story, and he was on the circuit telling his story until he was murdered. So, but you would think that Al Bielek would be a little bit nervous, but he wasn't. But it was a shame. So Phil Schneider, though, he lost all his fingers.
That's right. That's right. And I'm
not. I
what?
Remember all this stuff.
Well, the reason why I laugh, Phil, it's one of the tragic stories ever. But the reason why I laugh about that comment that you just made is they tried to say, here's a guy that is got a wheelchair. He's messed up physically beyond what, and he's got no fingers. And they're trying to say that he wrapped and tied, and hung himself. And he's got no. It's ludicrous. And the autopsy.
He couldn't have done it.
No, it's impossible. And the autopsy didn't even come out till 2 weeks later. And they're trying to say it was a suicide, when at that point in his life, his family life was straightened out. He was happy. He was optimistic. He was on the circuit. He was doing his thing, and he had everything to live for. And then he just kills himself.
And he gave some great presentations too.
Oh, amazing presentations. And you've got those too as well, right?
Yeah. Al gave them to me to put on there on the CD. That's where they came from.
Did you? Well, go ahead.
No, I mean that was part of Al's collection. He was able. I think when Phil died, somehow they had worked something out where he had the rights to some of his videos. So he asked me to put those on the CD. So I digitized them and put them on the CD for people to watch.
Phil Schneider, what most people don't know, when Phil is up speaking and you see him, you don't know about the physical side of him and what is really standing up there. You see his face and you see the microphone, but you don't necessarily see his hands or see his body or see underneath his clothes or see that side of Phil. And that's critical here.
Well, do you know how that happened?
Well, I know parts of it. I mean, I know what he said about the Dulce base and
Dulce,
right. And he got hit by some type of pulse weapon, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it killed people beside him, but it almost killed him, but left him without fingers and some really bad scars on the rest of his body.
Yeah, Phil Schneider. And I would have loved to have talked to him. And I talk about him on the show all the time, and I think it's so important. What people don't understand about Phil is they may go see some of his presentations and see that side of it and not understand honestly how he was killed. And that to me, if you go and read the newspaper, go and read the autopsy report and read everything that the police had to say about it and the scene of the crime and everything, and you go and you find out, and you just have to step back and go, this dude was killed. He was killed. Who would kill him? Why? And like I just referenced, Michael, it's so important that, yeah, there's the Dulce underground base incident. Yes, and he spoke about underground bases a lot. But he got into other subject matter that was really, really dicey. Black projects, international politics, the military and imperialism and the things that we were doing around the world and overthrowing government. That's what he was starting to speak about a lot. And that's when he was killed. He wasn't killed after the Dulce base, story. It was much later on, and when he was getting into some really, really dicey areas that made me uncomfortable. I would sit there and listen. I'm like, Phil, why are you going here? You're going into a zone that most people just don't go into, and you have a lot of knowledge, and this seems real and tangible, and when you go back and you look at Phil today, and you go back and look at those last few speeches that he gave before he was killed, and you listen to those, man, I'm telling you, dude was on the money. He was absolutely right, and so yeah, he was off. He was definitely. Phil Schneider was silenced, so there's no question about it. But it's interesting how you said that Al, even after this close relationship that he had with Phil, wasn't concerned about his own life.
Al never was concerned about his own life, ever. I was concerned. I didn't want to be myself, Phil Schneider Part 2.
Right.
But Al, no, he never was concerned at all. He felt he was just used.
Were your phones ever messed with? Did you ever have people outside of your hotels or your house or anything like that?
They may have been there. I never found out. I didn't hear any clicking, or I never saw anybody. I think the fear was more internal and just me thinking I shouldn't be hearing this stuff.
Do you know what happened? Did Al have any of Phil's personal stuff? Did he get that besides tapes? Artifacts, paperwork, anything like that? What happened to all of that?
I don't know. I think he went to Phil's house after Phil was murdered. I think. I can't remember. But if he ever got anything, he never told me about it.
Do you know what happened to Al's personal belongings?
Wow. Did Al have anything is a question.
Yeah, right.
I don't.
Right.
He somehow, after I was done with him, he goes down to Florida. How he got to Florida is beyond me. I don't know. But from Florida, he wound up in Mexico for a little while. I believe he died in Mexico.
Mm.
So he never had much of anything at all.
Let's take a quick break. This is Fade to Black. Tonight, Michael Houtzager is with us, the life and times of time traveler Al Bielek. We'll be back right after this short break. More with Michael in just a bit. Stay with us. Say hi to Michael.
Good evening, Jimmy. Michael, two questions. I'm kind of not as versed in time travel, but and I love me some Phil Schneider. I mean, he was a brave man. I have to say that first off. But what did Al, what did he do? I mean, back in the day, what did he do? What was the purpose of the program he was in, you believe? And number two, is a program of time travel, if we know what it's for, is it still in effect, still being used today by this group, whoever they are? And who are they, you believe, that are running it?
Well, I wish I knew the answers to both those questions. But let's talk about Al Bielek. What did he do in the program? So his job was part of the mind control aspect. He worked with Preston, and Preston somehow worked with sound, and through sound they were able to come up with ways to turn that into waves, and these waves would control people. The goal was to do mind control to the mass population, and that was a program that he worked in. Somehow related to mind control was time travel, and not only time travel, but travel to distances. I remember Al talking to me about visiting Mars and going in tunnels with his brother, and there were past civilizations there. He apparently went on several time travel or distance travel programs, and that's what he said he did a lot of. Who are the people behind this? I don't know. They're not your government. There are other people behind the government. Is it still going on? I personally don't know if it ever went on. I wasn't there. All I can tell you is what he told me. So, if you go to Montauk today, there's not much, but it could have been moved somewhere else.
Well, I know about Montauk, but can you add any other evidence for this Philadelphia experiment? I mean, is there anybody that actually saw the ship appear in another port? And was there anybody who actually witnessed sailors being melded with the metal of the ship? I mean, I know the story, but has there ever been any proof of this?
I looked for people. When I talked to Al, said nobody's going to believe this, I try to get people who would say, yeah, I've been there, yeah, I saw it. I couldn't find them at all. In fact, there was somebody put up a website called Philadelphia Experiment Debunked, I think it was called, where they sort of took Al's statements and proved him wrong in many things, or he was not, he'd say one thing one time and another thing another time, or it couldn't have been proven. So there were other people, I don't remember their names, that talked about the Philadelphia experiment, but it was in a different context. So I personally never found anyone that said that they had been in it.
Well, thank you for the truth, and it's still a mystery, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dino. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Good.
So, I'm not to be the advocate of things. I'm just to be the reporter of things. And my job was to, let Al Bielek tell his story. So if what he's saying is true, then there are higher-ups, there are elites, there's a mind control program, and all these things are happening, which definitely bothers me, but I can't prove it. So I have to leave it with that. I think you have other guests on the program that can say they were part of the program.
Right.
But I myself was not. And I just have to tell the truth. So
hi, you're
if
live.
It's happening, I don't like it.
Hi, you're all back. What about Preston Nichols? Was he an easy of an interview as Al?
Yeah, Preston Nichols, all of them were difficult interviews, because I don't like to interview people and let them just say a canned speech. So I like to interject and let me take it on the course I want it to go. And so Preston himself had his agenda, I felt, when I talked to him. And when I veered him off, I got these bizarre answers. So he was a tough nut to interview. But a lot of people do interview him. You probably should one day if you can find him. But he was a key part of what went on out there, according to Al. And in fact, I'm going to share this with you. I haven't shared this with anybody, but I remember I did keep in touch with Al Bielek. And when 9/11 happened, he did tell me, Al Bielek told me that he had talked to Preston Nichols, and Preston Nichols had been to where the Twin Tower wreckage was to retrieve a time travel device.
Really?
And that's what he told me. Yeah.
Now, after 9/11 happened, like in the future, or was it
no
at the scene?
I was still in touch with Al. So he and I, after we were done with the project, we kept touch for some time. It wasn't until, I don't know, so 9/11 happened in September. I think he and I, we broke our relationship in February, March, April, something like that.
Of 2002.
Yeah. So we were still in touch, and I do recall him talking to Preston quite a bit, and I do recall him telling me that Preston told him he was in New York to pick up a time travel device. And that's all I can say.
There was with Preston. Okay, as dark as it gets with Stewart, in his own personal experiences there, and when you talk to him, I mean it's frightening. It's a frightening, nightmarish type of thing that they went through, and Al's descriptions are very close to Stewart's and things. Preston goes into a whole nother darkness side of it, and this is a family show too as well, so we don't need to go, but you know what I'm talking about. And he goes there, and it's dark, and even if it wasn't real, Michael, and I want your answer to this. If it's not real, then that means somebody's mind is going to a really, really bad place that mine never goes to. I'm more into Charlie Brown and Saturday morning cereal. My life is more like that. I'm not, but Preston, he goes into a very dark area. Did you have to prod him into that? Did you coax him into that area? Or did he go there on his own? And how comfortable were you with it? Did you ever have to circumnavigate back off the darkness?
My focus with Preston was to understand the engineering behind it. So while he may have gone into some dark areas, I wasn't interested in that.
Good.
I was more interested in the scientific stuff. And what he talked to me about was music and how music could be used for mind control, and how he was able to create electronics that converted whatever mind control message that they wanted through music and through other means, through the chair, into a mind control device. That was my focus with him. Unfortunately, there were dark aspects of it, but I wasn't interested in that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you. And there's one, people need to understand about Preston. He's an inventor. He's a creator. He does lots of things in the music industry, and he's always forward thinking there. And that part of him is really, really interesting.
Right.
So I don't want to cloud his background or his personality. That's not what I'm referring to here. I'm just saying that there are dark sides to Montauk where Preston will freely talk about, and ones that I personally am not comfortable. I even put up my wall and go, you know what? I don't need to go there. I don't really want to know about that aspect of it. And I hear him talking about it all the time, very freely. And it's like, where does this come from? And if it's real, that That's harsh. That is almost not. I could see it, man. I could see the scary scientist with the whacked out glasses in the operating room doing crazy stuff to people. And that's what I'm referring to with Preston. Now, what about Larry James? How much time did you spend with Larry?
So I didn't spend a lot of time with Larry. And of course, that's not his real name. He asked me not to use his real name. He was kind of a younger guy. And he said that his involvement in the whole thing, he knew Al at the Montauk project. There was a time where they destroyed it. I think Duncan created a monster.
Yep.
And the monster destroyed the base, and then people came in and killed everybody and shot them up. There were a few people that were able to, that were part of the program, get into the chair, take their soul, and transfer it into somebody else. So he was one of those somebody else's. And I know he was down in Orlando, Florida, and he knew Al well. Al and him bonded. They were good friends. And he was, in my mind, he was a bit paranoid. I remember a year or two after I had created the CD, he told me that a friend of his said that I put some spyware on the CD so that anybody who ran it, it was going to send a signal to the NSA that they're listening to stuff like this. And he even came to my apartment and talked to me about it. He would never talk to me on the phone. And I said, show me where it is. I will remove all the CDs and never sell another one. And he never could. So I just, he was kind of smart, but not that smart.
He sounds like in the interviews, he sounds like a kid. Well, especially next to Al, which you could tell he's an aged, developed, mature, older man. You can tell. And when he would speak, he was rapid fire young, and you could hear it in his voice. Is that how old he was?
Right. Yeah, he was in his 20s. He was young. And I didn't give him, I do believe he believed it, but I didn't give him a lot of credibility nor a lot of time.
Why is that?
I just didn't feel that, the material that he presented was that cohesive. Unlike Al. And again, he was a very small part of the whole program, but he says he knew Al. He just worked at the program. They found a way out, and he got back to Al. They remember each other. So he was a small part of the whole program. So there wasn't a lot that I could really interview him on.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, because it felt to me, look, and I'm glad we're not using his real name, because I can say whatever I want, right? Not get sued. But when it came to Larry's part in this, although some of his stuff was detailed and it was colorful, it seemed like he was playing off of Al's story and would expand on it or agree to it and offer his own little take. But it was, it wasn't Al's story. It was nothing compared to the way that Al did it. And he was almost like a reasonable facsimile of Al's story. Am I accurate?
Could be, to a degree. Again, if he never got a penny for anything that he did with me. So, I could see him coming up with a crazy story if I offered him $10,000 or something like that. But he never received a penny. And I truly believe he spoke his own truth, and I do believe probably Al's story influenced him, and he was the one that came up with the Swiss cheese memory thing.
Right.
I think he was struggling to figure out who he was, and he felt that through Al Bielek, he found an identity. So out of everybody that's out there that could be, making it up, I'd say the highest probability was him.
Now, where is he today?
No clue. I mean, when I left this thing, I left it. So I just don't know.
Okay. And then the last player in the mix, well, at least for you, was Duncan Cameron. And
Right.
and how did you meet Duncan? And well, let's kind of start there, because when you were introduced to Duncan, how far along were you into the story, and when did he come into the picture?
So Duncan Cameron was the brother of Ed Cameron, and Ed Cameron is Al Bielek today, right?
Right.
And it was the two of them that jumped off the ship together. He came in toward the very end of the story. This was when I told Al I need some more people telling me the story, just like the caller came in, said, who else do you know that's witnessed the Philadelphia experiment? I was the same way. If it's just you telling me the story, who's going to believe you? So he has been in touch with Duncan for quite some time. They've done some seminars together, and he had the phone number for Duncan. It was a lot of work for me to actually get Duncan to agree to an interview. He was in Long Island, New York. I was in Atlanta, Georgia, so I wasn't going to fly all the way up there. But Al talked to him, and then I did record Duncan on the phone. I got to say that the interview I did with him was very unsatisfying. I don't feel he really directly answered any of my questions. I really tried to get him nailed down to say, were you part of the Philadelphia experiment? Did you know Al Bielek as, Ed Cameron? That's what I really wanted to know. And as I would ask those questions, he sort of danced around the answers. So he kind of agreed that he was, but he didn't really firmly agree.
Was his
That's why
was his attention to detail like Al's or Stewart's?
No, flaky. I hope he's not listening, but just real flaky in answers that he would give me. Like you say, what's 1 and 1? And, he would talk about the moon and the stars and the sun and maybe finally get to 2, but it took a long time to get there.
Right. And how long did you spend with Duncan? A couple hours?
Yeah, it was just one interview that I did with him. I think it was probably about an hour. It's on the CD.
Right. And, well, I think on the CD it's about an hour. I didn't know if there was outtakes is where I'm going. Was it longer than that?
No. That's all he would give me. That was it. One call, that was it.
And first impressions and credibility are everything. Were you interested in maybe talking to Duncan again, or were you done?
I was done with Duncan. I think with Duncan, I would have had to have been face-to-face with him like I was with Al.
Right.
When you're face-to-face, you can really look at their mannerisms and pick up on different things you can't pick up on over the phone. So I felt on the phone I did all I could do. In order to go deeper, I had to be face-to-face.
Well,
at that time, I didn't have the means to do so.
You have no idea who you're talking to.
And that too, right.
That's it. Could have been an actor. Could have been anybody. Could have been whatever. But there's that aspect of it, and trying to stand behind it. If you can't vet and you can't take things to the next level, and even if it's a phone interview on Skype where you've got a video picture, and you can at least do that, right? But if it's just a phone interview and it's feeling sketchy, well, then you know what?
Yeah.
It's probably sketchy.
Right. And go back. My goal was not to prove or disprove aliens, time travel, Montauk Project, Eldridge, any of that.
Right.
I just simply wanted to tell a story. And so at least there's that interview with Duncan. And if somebody else wants to listen to it and pick it up and go forward with Duncan, I'm sure he's probably still alive. Use that as a basis for your conversation with him.
Right. And how about what? And how about you? You've gone. You're out of the industry. You don't do this anymore. But have you had any strange experience? Have you ever seen anything strange in the sky that you can't explain? Have you had any kind of experiences like that allow you to think, well, there might be something to this?
Well, I get that question a lot. And, I myself, to my knowledge, have not met an alien. To my knowledge, I've not seen a UFO, although I would desperately love to see one. And I'd love to meet an alien. I think it'd be extremely fascinating. As you can tell, I like to ask people questions.
Right.
But I just haven't. But I have met so many people who say they have. So I feel sort of gypped that, I haven't had that experience. I would love to have that experience where you look up in the sky and there is a spacecraft traveling.
Right.
The only thing I have seen was a meteorite. This was about a week ago.
Oh, really?
And you don't see that too often. And I was walking with my wife around the neighborhood. I do that to stay in shape. And I looked up, and there it was, bright as day, and she missed it. But it was on the news. I mean, something that happened 2 seconds.
Right.
I saw it, and then it was actually on the news the next day. So I'm just surprised with all these people saying all these things about spacecrafts, why don't we get more news reports?
Yeah, well,
I'd like to see that.
Look, and we're wrapping up here, but I'll share this with you. Even the audience is going to go, Jimmy, not again. Please don't tell the story again. But I will say this, Michael, where you can rest comforted in this. My wife and I had a sighting right here in the valley, San Fernando Valley, where, a million people are in the middle of it was right there, came down, looked like it crashed in downtown Van Nuys. It was right there. We saw it, and it wasn't on the news. And I still, to this day, I cannot believe that KTLA and KTTV and Fox and ABC, NBC, and everybody else wasn't flooded with phone calls. The LA Times, the LAPD, the LA County Sheriffs weren't flooded with calls, and that this wasn't in the news, and somebody didn't snap a picture of it. Now, it lasted for a couple of seconds, but no reports. And we saw what we saw. So it's okay. I don't, that's my own experience, but when this stuff doesn't hit the news, it flashes for a split second. And who's really going to report it? Who's going to step forward and do it? It just doesn't happen. And it didn't happen with me. And there you go. I called MUFON. MUFON didn't have any reports that night. And I was just like, wow, that's just insane. And I checked the news for a week every single day. This was 2000. My wife will have to help me here, but I'm going to say 2007, 2008, right in there. It never hit the news. And, this is one of the biggest populated areas on planet Earth, and nobody reported a thing. Yeah, it happens. It does happen. So
are we almost out of time?
Yeah, we are. What would you like to say?
Just one last thing, because this is going to go sort of down on the record. One of the things that actually made Al and I somewhat split was I was talking to him, and somehow the Holocaust came up. And I was talking to him, and he looked at me, and he said the Holocaust never happened. And I remember talking to him, saying, Al, I said, I said, you shouldn't say stuff like that.
Right.
Even if you don't believe it's true, just shouldn't.
You know what? We're up against a hard break. I want to hear this.
Oh.
Okay, we're up against a hard break. We'll be right back. More with Michael Houtzager. We're going to do a little bit of overtime with Michael. We can't leave on that note. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. And we're going to wrap up with Al Bielek and the Holocaust. Here we go. Right after this short break. Stay up. Started to drop a bombshell. So I gotta keep you on. But Michael, let me say this before I hear what you're about to say. Whenever anybody hits me with that, I immediately tune out. I don't want to hear it. It does. I don't go there. And coming from Al Bielek, I've got to stop and listen. So, okay. So you said that Al said to you that the Holocaust never happened. What happened?
Well, it made me mad when he said that. I grew up in Germany, in Stuttgart, and there was, I believe the name of the concentration camp was Birkenau.
Right.
I remember going to it, and, you see pictures and the horrors and stuff like that. It definitely has an impact on you when you go to a real concentration camp, and I was able to do that. But he looked at me like he always does, just like with that whole presidential election thing, and rattled my cage again. And he says, he looked at me and he says, it didn't matter. And I didn't want to go deeper into it, to be honest with you. I wanted to just drop it because I was mad at him for saying that. And I was saying, and here I am, I've put all this effort into this CD.
Bingo.
And then here's a guy saying the Holocaust never happened. So this is the part that troubles me, though, is I do search out for information, and there are groups of people who have very interesting stories about how the Holocaust possibly was misframed. The 6 million, certainly there was an effort to kill Jews, no question about that. They worked in these camps. As far as the gas chambers and the idea of 6 million, that could be debated. But what does bother me about the whole Holocaust thing is that in 17 countries, if you question it, you can go to jail.
That's right.
And that doesn't make it, why is that so? So, it's one of these things where I hope he's wrong, but I just want to put that on the table because I think the point of tonight is to put everything on the table, the good, the bad, the ugly, and let you guys decide what to do with it. Because I don't want to lie about it.
Sure.
But that's what he said.
Yeah. Was there any type of was there a racist side of Al there that started to surface? Do you think that was part of it?
I don't, because the Larry James guy was Jewish.
Right. Interesting.
So
did Larry say the same thing?
No, I didn't ask him. But there was a racist. I remember Larry telling me the reason why he picked a Jew was because the people at Montauk didn't like him and wouldn't look for him, wouldn't relate to him. So when he escaped Montauk in the chair and he picked the body, he picked a Jew intentionally. So I never saw a racist side to Al. I just saw a very matter-of-fact side.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with that part. He, the thing is when, and you were talking about your aspiring possible career as a journalist, right? As an interviewer. You don't have anybody better to interview than Al Bielek because you're just going to sit down and go, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I started out with the best.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what he would do, man. He'd put his eyes straight into the camera and wouldn't stop for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And
right.
That's an incredible part of him. When you say matter of fact, it didn't get any more matter of factor than Al Bielek. And for him to come out with that about the Holocaust, it almost, unless he has some kind of, he's indicating that he knows something. But it to me, it didn't fit his persona. That's why I was asking about the racist side. It never surfaced in him before.
Never. No, he never really said anything racist at all about anybody. It was just, I think somehow I was talking about the Holocaust, and he just looked at me and said it didn't happen.
Wow.
And that was it. And that's one of those subjects I simply did not want to go deep into.
Yeah, I don't go there either. I'm not interested.
Yeah, so but it really caused me to split from him. I think that was the start of a split.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your honesty on that, and I appreciate it. It's interesting. It's just another part of the tale, isn't it?
got one last thing to say.
Sure.
Do we have a minute?
Sure.
So I remember Al opened up his wallet one time, and there was a picture he was looking at of a young man. And that was the only time that I saw any emotion in him. And I said, "Who's that, Al?" I can see the picture in my mind. But he said, "I'm not ready to talk about it, but they gave him AIDS and took him away from me."
Wow.
And that's all I know.
Wow.
He wouldn't talk about it, but we can
wow.
surmise.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you surmise?
Yeah. Well, the easy thing is to say, maybe through all these experiments and all that, it turned him gay. I don't know.
Right. Right.
But that's the only time I saw any emotion is when he looked at that picture.
Did he ever talk about a significant other, man, woman, doesn't matter, husband, wife, interest, love interest, ex-wife, anything? Just that picture?
Yes. No. In his other lifetime, he talked about children and wife and all those people, but not this lifetime.
Right. Ed Cameron.
Yeah. The Cameron lifetime, he was married, he had children.
Right.
Great life, great dad, great everything.
But as Al
this
Bielek,
lifetime, he hated his dad. We didn't talk much about his mother. He didn't seem to have a very good life.
Wow. Al Bielek, thank you so much for sharing. And, I would like to keep the invitation open anytime you would like to come back on. If there's anything else that breaks or anything else that you find out and you would like to talk about it and so forth, please come back on the show. I feel like we just literally, no pun intended, but scratched the surface tonight. But it had to be spoken about, and you don't do this. And I want to thank you again for coming on the show and sharing with us. And it's tough, but you were there and you did it, and we need to hear about it. So thank you, Michael.
I can't believe I still remember this after 15 years. But wow, I remembered a lot. I tried to put it out of my head, but it's still there.
And much, Michael.
Have a good evening.
You too. Have a great night. Michael Houtzager, everybody. It's kind of funny you hear me say at the end of an interview like that, how great, but it was all that. But this is the thing about Al Bielek. Go and watch when you hear firsthand references back to Al. His interviews are incredible, but he's not here with us anymore. But it was Michael. 24 hours of interviews with Al Bielek. And you heard Michael say in the interview tonight that he was with him 40, 50, 60 times. And so he got to know the man. And we don't have a direct connection back to Al Bielek. Now, what I want you to do, once you go, and you can go to Bielek.com, it's right there. Easy enough. The links are at Jimmy Church Radio. The DVDs are there, and he's got quite a few. So go and do that. But when you watch the interviews and you listen to Al, I want you to go back and remember this evening and that side of it and who Al was and the background. It's so important. I have many, many, many evenings listened to Al's story, fallen asleep, dreamed about it, listened and gone back and literally spent weeks like that. And he's the one guy out of so many that I wish I could go back and interview. But you'll remember tonight with Michael Houtzager, this interview tonight, when you go and listen to Al Bielek. Tonight after the show, that's your homework. Go and do it. Thank you so much, Michael.